A great title it's agony to come up with a great title. But if something comes in with a great title, you immediately sit up, you immediately feel a confidence that the writer has a vision for what they're trying to accomplish, that they have a point of view. You just feel like you're in good hands.
Welcome to the Publishing Playbook, the podcast that goes behind the scenes of the book publishing world. Our goal is to help you better understand publishing, collaborate with the team behind your book, and find your readers. I'm your host, Sarah Russo, the founder and CEO of Page One Media and Page One Education. In this episode, I sit down with editor and publisher Sarah Crichton. Sarah started her career in magazines and went on to spend decades at some of the most prestigious houses in the business, including Farrar, Straus & Giroux, where she ran her own eponymous imprint for 15 years. Two of the books we discuss in this episode are the international bestseller A Long Way Gone by Ishmael Beah, one of the first books published at Sarah Crichton Books. We also talk about A Mighty Heart, which Sarah co-wrote with Mariane Pearl. Today, Sarah and I dive into what it means to edit with the reader in mind, the art and adrenaline of crashing a book, and how the roles of editor and publisher are increasingly converging. We also discuss what makes a manuscript stand out from the pile and how a great title can change everything. Sarah Crichton, thank you so much for joining me on the Publishing Playbook.
It's great to be here, Sarah Russo.
So I'm going to start with an easy one. Your background in publishing is vast and extensive, but you started out in the magazine world. How did that background shape the kind of editor and publisher you became in books?
It actually shaped it hugely. And when I moved from magazines to books, that was a very uncommon leap. In recent years, it's not that uncommon for people to sort of fly from one area to another area and beyond. Into podcasts or whatever. Yes. But back then they were seen as very different. In magazines, you don't exist unless readers like you and feel that you like them and that you see them. And in books, and I think this is still true to a certain degree, editors forget that there are readers out there. Editors respond to the authors, they're responding to their bosses, they're responding to agents. But they're forgetting that ultimately it's the reader who you need and you want. And also you have to remember they're spending a lot of money on a book.
I think you're right. And I think we often forget that the book is for the reader.
You have to remember the reader and you have to remember what the world is like at a given moment and also anticipate where the world is going to be a couple of years out. It's going to take you a couple of years to write the book, to edit the book, and then it's going to take quite a long time before the book is out in the world. So what are people going to be thinking about then? And who are they going to be? Coming out of magazines, I was able to help writers see where their story needed to be headed so that it could connect and talk to a reader down the road.
One thing we haven't talked about on the show yet is crashing a book, which is one of my least favorite things in the world to do on the marketing and publicity side.
I love crashing books.
So will you explain what crashing a book is to the audience?
Sure. Crashing a book is when there is something happening in the world that is happening right now, and the writer is either a journalist or somebody in the know who has a story that needs to get out there very quickly. I most recently crashed a book with the writer Michael Wolff, who has written a lot about Trump. His books really are almost up to the moment books. He would just be, I don't want to say churning out because it sort of implies that there isn't craft or skill or whatever, but he would be moving so fast and I would be reading them and editing them, but I often needed other editors to be working alongside me so that they were doing certain chapters while I was doing other chapters. And meanwhile, often when you're crashing a book, you're doing it in secret because you want to get out there before another publisher. Another publisher might have a similar book, or you want to break news. So you have to be very private. So everything is hush hush, moving fast, working around the clock. Publicity is in the room, figuring out who they're going to be notifying at a split second. Press releases will go out. And so the whole thing is extremely complicated and completely thrilling, because you can have something that shows up really in 2 weeks' time, which you have to understand that in book publishing, going a year is pretty common. So to move that quickly there's a lot of adrenaline pumping, and there's a lot of nail biting.
It's a huge heavy lift across every department. It really has to get on board and make it all happen together. I worked on a book by Kathleen Jamieson called Cyberwar a few years back.
Oh, yeah.
That was about the 2016 election and the interference with Russia. And Jane Mayer at the New Yorker was going to do the exclusive on the story, and the whole thing. I mean, it was such an undertaking, but it got out there and it got great press, and it did its job. You know, it was at the time, it was a big story that she had the data analysis behind it that actually showed what happened. Will you explain what the difference between an editor and a publisher is? How do the roles differ from each other? You've done both a number of times.
First of all, I think that over time, the two roles are merging a lot more. And one of the key roles of any editor is communicating to the in-house troops, to the sales force, to the publicity folks, to the marketing folks, and to the publisher, his or herself, the importance of the book and the strength of the book. The editor helps define who the audience is, how big that audience conceivably can be, and they even talk to the art department. So the editor is the conduit between the author and the in-house troops. The publisher then takes that information, works further with the sales force, makes decisions about the money that they're going to spend. You have to remember that publishing houses, even small publishing houses, will have quite a few other books. And so there's a lot of in-house competition for money, time, support, energy. But when I say that the two roles are getting closer to one another, it used to be, in the old days, the editor really just sort of worked on the words, and the publisher had the sales picture and the marketing picture. And more editors are having to supply that information and play that role to a great degree, and then hope to hell that the publisher accepts their vision, accepts their concept, sees what they're talking about, and goes forward with it.
I think that concept of the internal competition is a really interesting one. You had your own eponymous Imprint for 15 years. How is that different than being an editor in sort of its own right, in sort of the traditional way? How did you think about your list differently? Did you think about acquisitions differently? How did it work for you?
Well, it was funny because when I was offered the job of starting an imprint for Ferris, Strauss and Giroux, Jonathan Galassi, who was head of FSG, said to me, I said, well, what should we call it? And he said, well, I was thinking we should call it Sarah Crichton Books. And it's like, wow. You know, remember I was coming out of magazines. So I really was looking for books where I could envision the reader. And I love a great story. I would get excited about connecting the books to audiences. So A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier by Ishmael Beah. I knew that book, when the agent first brought me, it was like a 600-page manuscript that Ishmael had been working on since he was in college. And it had been turned down by publishers all over because they couldn't figure out where in those 600 pages there was a book.
Yeah.
Ishmael had been a child soldier in Sierra Leone at the age of 12 when his whole family was murdered and there was a civil war. A lot of what he had written was quite childlike. It was really through the eyes of that 12-year-old kid, which was very important because I knew that kids were going to be fascinated by the experience and that this was a book that wasn't just going to talk to grown-ups, but could talk to kids because they needed to know and wanted to know what that experience was like. That was that was my second book that I published. And I was very excited because I knew that I had something very rare. It was also, we made the book very short so that it could be assigned in classes. Big fat books don't get assigned in schools because it takes a whole semester to read.
Yeah.
But if you have a short book, it gets assigned. And that was a book that got assigned all over the country for quite some time.
Yeah, I
So
bet it still
it was
does.
very exciting.
It's over 20 years ago because I was at FSG over 20 years ago. And I distinctly remember that book. And I didn't work on it. I wasn't the publicist for it. And it really was something remarkable. It was a distinct moment in my publishing history that I remember. The campaign behind it, the enthusiasm everyone at the publisher had about the book, the resources it had. I think it was the first Starbucks book pick, which wasn't something that happened before then. It was a completely unique thing that occurred. I don't even know how that came together, to be perfectly honest. Like that, what a remarkable thing that was. It was a unique and fascinating campaign, and that was a testament to what you saw in the book itself. I love launch meeting is probably my favorite meeting of the whole publishing year. It is so fascinating. So for those who don't know, launch meeting is when the editors come and present the books that they would like to be on the next list, whether it's the fall list or the spring list, whatever it is. And they tell the story of each of those books and a bit about the author and sort of why they think it's important. It's fascinating because you get to hear it all from the acquiring editor's view and what they are seeing as special in these individual books. Were there meetings that you particularly enjoyed? Are there things in the editorial space, those meetings, that you feel like were where everyone got on board, where people started to come together, or were they harder for you too?
It depends house to house. I've worked at Little Brown, I worked at FSG, and then I worked at Henry Holt. And each house had different strengths and different weaknesses, which frankly came down to some of the key people. But when I was at Holt, what I absolutely loved were the art meetings where you would discuss the jacket design.
Yeah.
A lot of art departments hate it if editors get involved. I mean, it's sort of like, get out of our lane. The jacket for Ishmael Beah for A Long Way Gone was very key because usually publishers, when they have something that is a dark, serious topic like child soldiers, they'll put a black and white jacket on. It'll be sort of grim. Or it'll be like Dave Eggers at the same time had a book about a child soldier, which was it was called What is the What? It was in your face. It was a face that was in your face.
Yeah.
What we did was we put and this was a real work of photojournalism from Sierra Leone. There was a little boy. He's wearing flip-flops. It's a very lush green background, but he also has a rocket-propelled grenade launcher on his back. The kid looks to be he's 10, 11, 12. There's a sweetness to it and a vulnerability. And on the back of the book, we put a big smiling picture of Ishmael. And people said, even Ishmael said, why are you, I'm grinning. Why am why are you putting this? And I said, because I want people to see, A, you're okay, and B, not be scared of you. See that, that they can read this book. Also, the cover looked like there's a story, not a lecture, but a story. You want jackets to reassure the reader that they're going to like it. They're going to, a lot of literary fiction is quite off-putting because it looks very, artistic. And I fall for that too, because you think, God, this is just so gorgeous. But one of the things that we all work on now is you want them to look really good when it's a thumbnail, when they're looking on Amazon or online or on their phone. You got to have a jacket that sort of registers.
It's a postage stamp.
It's a little postage stamp. So I love art meetings when they are fun and interactive, but some are not.
It's such a unique skill. And we've worked with Charlotte Strick and Brady McNamara, Chip Kidd, right? I've worked with so many really, really brilliant jacket designers, and it is something special. So I remember, I'll go back to the old days, when I was at Knopf, I used to be part of reading the slush pile, right? I was sort of the first iteration of things that came in without an agent or were just submitted. What are you looking for when you are assessing manuscripts?
Boy, does a great title help. And a great title it's agony to come up with a great title. But if something comes in with a great title, you immediately sit up, you immediately feel a confidence that the writer has a vision for what they're trying to accomplish, that they have a point of view. You just feel like you're in good hands. There's a critic named Laura Miller who reviews for a number of places, and I once asked her what she looks for in deciding what to review. And she said, every Monday I stack up a bunch of galleys and I read the first chapter. And if I'm not engaged after the first chapter, I throw it aside. And I said, oh, that's terrible. That's terrible because so many books get so much better after the first chapter. And she said, yeah, but if you can't make the first chapter interesting, then why am I expected to hang in there? But I read novels, and most editors read novels all the way through. I don't know about most, but I read novels all the way through before signing them up, because you've got to have a great ending of a book.
I know you have also done some editing outside of publishing houses, what is sometimes referred to as developmental editing. Some people call it book doctors, right? Before it even gets to an agent or gets to a publishing house. Is that necessary? Do you feel like authors should be hiring developmental editors? Is it something that everybody could benefit from? Is it for select people? What do you think? How does that work?
Well, I think, first of all, the number of projects that actually make it to an agent that gets signed up is very, very small. Yeah. And the number of books that agents, especially fiction or memoirs, because a lot of people are working on memoirs, that becomes a very small number. That said, my sister and I, well, really my sister did the hard work. My mother had left behind, when she died, a memoir about her early years as a housewife, mother of 4 children, married to a charismatic alcoholic husband in the 50s, and then she started to have a career. And the truth was, it's a wonderful manuscript, wonderful book. No publisher was going to publish it, but my sister took the manuscript and cleaned it up. We self-published it. Yeah. And it's now reached, I think 350 people have bought it on Amazon. Yeah. We sent it to Kirkus. It cost $500 to get reviewed, but they called it a tour de force. They gave it a starred review.
Wow.
So then we had a really good review that we could put on Amazon. It's been picked up different places, and it has a life. So self-publishing is not a terrible thing. And, there are ghostwriters, there are book doctors, different people have different roles. I had a fantastic experience co-authoring a bunch of books that were published. I'm very proud of this book, A Mighty Heart, that was written with Mariane Pearl, who was the widow of the journalist Danny Pearl, who was killed by ISIS right after 9/11. We had an incredible experience working together on that book. And she truthfully could not have written it without me because it was such an emotional experience. And she needed, we worked side by side, and she wrote parts of it, but I wrote parts that she just couldn't bear to write. We would sort of sit together and edit it and piece our parts together. I also co-wrote or ghost wrote a number of other books for some politicians who didn't have time, and they basically talk to you and give you their story, and you shape that. A lot of people who want to write books about health or emotional topics turn to developmental editors, and that's fine because they are not natural book writers. They don't know how to organize them. They don't know how to shape them. You just have to recognize that in many cases, you're talking about thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
If you're expecting to pay those thousands of dollars and then get a contract at the end of it, that equation is
Not typical.
frankly, it's not typical. Yeah. I like not typical is much nicer than unrealistic because it will, in some cases it does happen, but it's not typical.
It's like hitting the lottery, right? Especially selling your book and getting a big advance is actually hitting the lottery.
Totally.
Sarah,
Totally.
This has been the best conversation. Can I ask you one last question?
Sure.
What are you reading right now?
I'm reading Vivian Gornick's Fierce Attachments. It's a memoir that came out many, many years ago. It is one of the most brilliant books I've ever read. I just got into my 70s, and I'm very curious about memoir. And Vivian Gornick, I just finished reading a book that she wrote called Odd Woman in the City. Very short, very brilliant. I also just finished reading Patti Smith's M Train, which I hated. That's another book where I hated the first 30 pages, but then afterwards, really interesting memoir. And I'm curious about sort of older women finding their voices in new shapes and forms, because I'm kind of playing with writing something like that, but I don't know if I can pull it off, and I don't know if I want to try.
Yeah.
Fierce Attachments, I went back to read an earlier Vivian Gornick, and I'm mesmerized. So
I love her
that's
books.
that. Yeah.
And Patti Smith too. Fantastic. And
Yeah.
that reminds me, I have to send you a copy of the second half. So I'll get your address. We'll do that later.
Okay. Fantastic.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah. It's really been really fun.
Thanks for listening to The Publishing Playbook. I'm your host, Sarah Russo. You can subscribe to our show wherever you like to get your podcasts, or find us on YouTube at Page One Media. This episode was produced by Julie Canfer with support from Bella Gibb and the team at New Books Network. For more information about Page One Media, please visit our website at www.pageonem.com. Keep on reading, and we'll talk to you soon.